Okay, so welcome everybody today to our next Aspiring Psychological Professionals Community of Practice. I think that this is our fourth or fifth one of these now, so it's really nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. Can you go to the next slide, Lara, is that all right?
Yeah, should be the agenda now.
So this is what our rough agenda looks like for today. We're going to try and stick to the timings, but of course they are flexible. So we'll go through some introductions first, a little bit about our ground rules of obviously working online tonight. An introduction to what the PPN is, for those of you who don't yet know, we'll give you a brief overview of what we do here. And then we really excitingly have Babasha, who's joined us today. He's got a presentation on self-care. And that's the point after that presentation where we'll turn off the recording and have an open discussion with everybody, and then look at the next steps for the group. Thanks so much, Lara. So first of all, the PPN team. So I guess Maggie's face is probably the most familiar to most people. Maggie is our chair of the East of England PPN. Unfortunately, she can't be here tonight, but she does send her hellos and apologies to everybody. My name is Anna. I'm a senior assistant psychologist. I'm working in the East of England PPN, and I also pop up in the Tier 4 IAP digital team for the PT SMHP team. And Lara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Lara. I'm a senior assistant psychologist and I'm also a psychological wellbeing practitioner. So I work with Maggie and Anna in the East of England PPN team and also as a psychological wellbeing practitioner in the IAP digital team.
Thanks. And then if we go to the next slide, I think we'd really here like to introduce Babasha.
Thank you. Lara, do you mind if I share my screen?
No
because
problem.
the Mentimeters are on there, so I can share that bit as well. Thank you.
Can we come back to here after you've shared that, just so we can go through what the PPN is before we go on to your full presentation?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, there's a few familiar names in the attendee list, but my name's Babasha. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist and the clinical lead for the Here For You Staff Support Service, and I'll be talking about the things that contribute to self-care, the pros and cons, but also the different aspects of self-care which can also be deemed as obstacles really as well. So I'm looking forward to having open discussions with you all about this as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Babasha. And it's also really important we have some introductions for our steering group. So this community of practice has its own steering group. Not 100% sure who is here today, but I know for sure we've got Kevin here. Kevin, would you like to say hello?
Hi everyone, lovely to be here again.
Thanks. And I've also seen Dan's face pop up.
Yeah, hello everyone. I feel like a bit of a fraud. I'm just at the start of my psychological journey. I've just finished the master's course, so hoping to get a job quite soon in the field.
Thank you, Dan. Definitely not a fraud, but thank you. Alice, I've seen your face pop up.
Hello, yeah, it's nice to be here again.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Holly, Robin, Emma or Rebecca are here. If you are, please feel free to say hello. Not today, that's okay. We always welcome new people into our steering group, so if anybody would like to join the steering group and help contribute to how these groups are run every month, then please feel free just to drop us a message, and we're really friendly and we'd love to speak to you as well. Can you go to the next slide, Lara, please?
Yeah, so I'm going to just talk through the ground rules for the group. So firstly, please keep your microphone on mute. Raise your hand if you would like to say something at any point, or you can type in the chat as well. We'll try to keep track of any comments that come in through the chat and hands up as we go along as well. Also, we encourage an interactive meeting, and this is a safe space where you can share what you would like to share. And also remember that this is a confidential space where we can be respectful of other people's opinions, even if they're different to our own. And we want this to be a really supportive environment and a place where you feel comfortable to share ideas and ask any questions that you'd like to. And we recognise that everybody is at different points in their career journey and no one has all of the answers. And we all bring valuable experience and can learn from one another. So there's no pressure to share anything that you don't want to. It's entirely up to you how much you interact and share with the group. Okay, so I'm just going to hand back over to Anna to tell you about the PPN.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to tell you a bit about the PPN. I won't go into lots of detail, as I know we do this every single month for those of you who come every month, and there's lots of recordings on what the PPN is now. But we are the Psychological Professions Network. There are 7 sections, I guess, as a PPN spread out across the country, and we represent the East of England. Some of you may be here today not from the East of England, and you are also very welcome, as this group is more of a national community of practice rather than just East of England specific. But we are commissioned by the Health Education England to try and provide a joined up voice for all of the psychological professions. And this includes new psychological professions that are entering our workforce, so we can try and create a strong voice and make sure that things are set up in a safe and effective way. On our website, you can also go onto the link there, which is a Psychological Professions Workforce Plan, which is quite a lengthy document, but it does go into a lot of detail about what we do. Next slide, please. Thanks. And here you will see, so very directly within the East of England, these are the areas that we cover, you can see on the screen. So it's quite a large area that we do cover, and a few of the things that we do are also popped in the bullet point boxes just there for you. So, for example, we like to help facilitate and foster clear career pathways, as we know it can be very confusing navigating your way through different career pathways within the psychological professions. We establish lots of communities of practice. So, of course, you are here attending one today as the aspiring psychological professions, but we also have one for health psychologists, counselling psychologists, CAPS, many different types. If you are of a profession that you feel, I would like to join another community of practice as well, just let us know and we'll get you invited to one. And if it's not already set up, then we will help to set that up. But yeah, just a few of the different things that we do are just shown there. So that's who we are. So now I think we are ready to hand over to Bhavisha.
Okay, I'll stop sharing our slides now so that Bhavisha can share their slides.
Lara,
there we go.
Yay. I had put some links in the chat for people to start. Is there Mentimeter links for people to start filling in if you feel you'd like to ahead of the slides as well? Anna, Lara, does my presentation start showing at all?
It's showing, just not in full screen, but it is showing. Now it's full screen. Perfect.
Excellent, thank you. So the presentation has been put together by my colleague Liz Harrington and myself, and as I said earlier, I'm from the Staff Support Service and it's called Here For You, and we cover Hertfordshire and Essex. And the reason that I think it'd be helpful for kind of Liz and I to have put this presentation together is actually from supporting staff, we've realised the importance of something as fundamental and so important as self-care, caring for self, because it actually builds the foundations of how productive we can be, how physically well we feel, how we can interact with others, just on the whole, whether it's professionally, personally, whether it's socially, but also by ourselves as well. So the importance of self-care is, I think, underrated, but I've talked about it in the past as it's the oxygen for well-being. So we wouldn't really say, okay, well, you know, breathing is optional. In the same sense, for our psychological well-being, caring for ourselves in whichever capacity, things that are going to be important for us for now, in 5 minutes time, in 5 hours time, something that you feel that'll be of benefit to you is also an essential component. But we know through the work that Here For You do is that because we provide support for staff within the caring profession, we know how difficult it is. We've heard firsthand, we've experienced it firsthand. We know that kind of there's a lot of stigma attached to things like caring for self as well. So we'll talk about some of these, we'll explore some of these in more detail in a moment. But before we think about self-care, there's a bit that happens before, and that's reflection. The importance of reflection is so that it helps us to stop, it helps us to notice, it helps us to think about the situation at hand. So Gibbs's reflective cycle highlights a really fantastic process. So there are various different cycles such as this one, but I think that this one, it really encapsulates the different elements involved. So what has happened in a situation? So when I was handing in my thesis many years ago, when I was handing in my thesis, I was having to kind of think about what was going on for me at the time. I became kind of quite tunnel visioned. I was there in the moment. I kind of ended up letting go of friends in terms of contact. My feelings were, I was very stressed. I was thinking I have to get this done. My kind of focus was on one aspect, and that was alone. What was good about the experience is it became actually quite difficult. I became quite stressed. It became relentless. What was bad? That was what was bad about the experience. What was good about the experience is that actually I think my focus really helped me zone in. And what sense did I make of the situation? It was functional, it was a necessity, it was a goal, a zone that I had to be in. What else could I have done? I could have reached out, but actually I didn't know what I was feeling at the time because I was so goal focused that I couldn't think of other ways, different ways to look after myself apart from being so goal focused. If it happened again, if I was in that zone, if I was going to go into that zone, I probably would do something preemptively as well. So there's lots of different things that could happen before a situation arises. If you know that there's something that is of a stressor, or if you know that things are overwhelming. And this is why reflection is really important. We know in the psychological profession that reflection is talked about quite a lot, and it does underpin development, whether it's development between a therapist and their client, their service user, whether it's in terms of the relationship between the two of you, the goals that you work towards, whether it's whether the focus is outside of the workplace, whether it's your development on your hobbies, on your activities, on your personal development, that will also help within the workplace as well. So reflection is fundamental, it is paramount, and that's where it starts. That's where caring for self starts, because actually it's difficult to self-care if you don't know what you need at that time. And that's where stopping, noticing, addressing some of these elements can be really helpful. So what is caring for self? So it supports with physical and emotional needs. And I've underlined this quote, the self part in this quote. And the reason I've underlined this through, you know, the oneself in terms of through awareness, self-control, self-reliance, and there's evidence to suggest that this can help prevention of physical health difficulties. It can promote optimal health and well-being. But the reason I highlighted self is that actually when we're talking about self-care, it really does put the responsibility on us, but it actually isn't only our responsibility. And that's what I really wanted to emphasize and highlight today as well, that actually there's so many influences and contributors that can either support or block. They certainly can influence our ability to self-care, but also just thinking about whose responsibility is it? Is it ours alone, or is it also from the support of others that we can achieve this? So I have put the Mentimeter in the chat, but I've also got it on the slide. So if you'd like to start filling this one in, so this code will take you to 2 questions, one which will come later, and there's also another code which will be that is also shared in the chat. But I just thought if you could just take a couple of moments to complete those questions if you haven't done so already. And I'd like to, I'm just going to put this here at the moment because I'd like to have this as a topic of discussion towards the end of the presentation. So feel free to add things in the chat if you would like to, but I will show the results of the Mentimeter towards the end of the presentation, as I say, to invite discussion regarding it as well. Okay. Oh. Sorry, I should say. So just thinking about some of the common areas of stress for you now. These could be personal, they could be professional, they could be things within your home, they could be things socially, they could be things specific to your workplace environment. It could be regarding people that you're seeing within your work, colleagues, service users. It could be our own internal constructs. What are the common areas of stress for you now? I'm going to move on to the next slide, but feel free to continue adding to the Mentimeter as you go along as well. So this slide highlights Paul Gilbert's model of that's from compassion focused therapy. And Liz and I had an interesting conversation when we were putting this, thinking about this slide in for this presentation, and thinking about actually where one is. So people might be experiencing the initial stages of their career in psychological services, or they could be further down and been quite established within their career. We know that these systems work for us as humans, where the drive system of having a goal, having a focus really helps us. So my example of handing in my thesis and having that zone that I was in my drive system. I was in my drive system having this goal to submit my paper, but I was also in my threat system because I was worried, I was anxious. Am I going to submit it in time? Is it going to be good enough? Will people think I'm a fraud if it's not good enough? What are the consequences of it? All of that was also playing into my mind. So I had the drive system really activated, but I also had my threat system activated. And these two were playing against each other as well. So they were really, I was exhausted because of this. I don't think I had much capacity for my soothing system. And we know that what's happened over recent times with COVID, with the pandemic, but also other stressors that are around, such as socioeconomic situation as well at the moment, kind of cost of living. We know that the soothing system may be less activated. Our ability to feel safe, to feel protected, to feel content, to feel looked after, whether it's through external means or whether it's by ourselves, because this can be heightened. And Liz and I talked, I kind of was like, actually, there may be people that have applied for the doctorate and they may be experiencing that threat system. And actually, Liz and I then talked about, how about people might be in this heightened state of drive, this focus, this goal. And we were wondering how many of you are noticing if this is being activated. And there may be people that have got this down to a T, and that would be great. And we can open up some conversations about this in a moment. But there may be some that know what their soothing system could look like, but actually haven't had the time, the capacity to be able to attend to it, which then, as we can see here, can impact on the threat and the drive system as well. We don't want any of these to go away, but what we don't want is to be overwhelmed by the systems such as threat. So we know that stress and burnout, even though we're in the caring profession, we're not immune to it. In fact, research does suggest that we're actually quite vulnerable to it. So there are significant issues for IAPT trainees. So the work that we do in mental health can be stress provoking. And lots of different factors contribute to this, whether it's the system, whether it's our own professional factors, but also the stigma in response to psychology psychological therapists seeking help and also receiving support. In the Here For You staff support service, we've heard many people through our work, many people say actually at 8 o'clock on a Thursday, people were tapping and banging pots and pans for us, and actually that meant that we were put on a pedestal in many ways. We appreciated that they were appreciating us, but actually it meant that we felt we had to have a cape, that we had to keep going, that we had to keep looking after others. So then how can those that are put in a position of high esteem of looking after others and somewhat pressure as well, then be receiving support for themselves? And you know, this stigma attached to it regarding actually I'm supposed to be caring for, and what, you know, am I supposed to be cared for myself? So we know that there's lots of change that is happening, but we've still got a long way as well with regards to addressing stigma. There's also factors of guilt. Should I? Can I? We know that burnout is very prevalent in mental health or mental health practitioners. And we also know that the exhaustion can impact on the quality of care that we can provide as well. So there's compassion fatigue, there's decision fatigue, there's change fatigue, that has all been very much at the forefront of the NHS, the care providers over recent years as well. So this diagram's fantastic as a visual representation. We want to be able to stay in this optimum level of yellow. We don't want to be too laissez-faire, but actually we also need to be reminded that if we do fall into exhaustion, into this orange or red zone of burnout, then actually we need the soothing system to really help us. What is it that we can do for self-care to help us back into the optimum level? So we're not saying we should never go out of this optimum level, because we know life happens. It's a roller coaster. Some predictable and some unpredictable events can take place. However, what is it that we can utilize around us, not only just within us, but around us, that can help us back into that optimum level of stress? The King's Fund talked of chronic excessive workload becoming like the pattern on the wallpaper we no longer see. So it's there, it's ever present, it's impacting on us, but actually we're kind of not looking at the lens that we could see this through. So again, another Mentimeter here regarding unhelpful beliefs that you feel that might be operating at the moment. So we'll bring in the results of this towards the end. So some of the barriers to looking after ourselves that can be organisational and system barriers. We know that there are certain social barriers. So actually, sorry, going on to organisation and system, it's about not having enough resources, not having enough staff, but having an increase of referrals as one example. Not having enough resources around us socially. We know a lot of people struggled during the pandemic with regards to maintaining social connections as well, and felt actually a lot of people ended up disengaging because they were so worried, or they felt that there wasn't enough time because there was so much stress and pressure over the pandemic that actually socially the kind of the pot became quite small. That's for some. For others, they found other means of becoming socially connected, so such as video calling, etc. But actually we know that there are sometimes the expectations of us attending to social events or meeting up with people can impact on our own ability to self-care as well. Family pressures, if one is a carer, how that can impact on your time and capacity to look after oneself, but also the expectations of potentially being here, there and everywhere for families. There's also the sandwich generation that sometimes people talk about. So if you've got dependents, but you've also got dependents such as children, but also parents, then you could potentially be the sandwich generation where you're the one in the middle trying to kind of look after people from different places as well. Personal barriers, our own guilt, our own internal guilt, but also the exhaustion that we have and the pressure also that we can put on ourselves. can also create this barrier. The cognitive, some of the thinking styles, and we'll talk about this in a moment, that can cause those obstacles. And also the capacity and time. Have I got enough time? Have I got enough time to go for my 5-minute sit in the garden and breather, which actually I feel would help, but actually I've also got to put the washing on, or I've also got to do X, Y, Z for work. Some of the additional barriers are, as I say, in terms of the internal ones, feelings of guilt. Sometimes it's a cultural process of actually culturally I was expected, or it was deemed suitable that I put others before me, and how can I put myself before others as part of my self-care? How can I look after myself? Because actually it may have not been so culturally appropriate to do so. It could be that actually we might not know how to set boundaries. Saying no is actually a way of looking after oneself as well, or not yet. Saying no, sorry, I can't do that, or I might be able to do that, but just not yet. Having too many other commitments, not having time or putting it off, thinking that self-care is a chore and it's a should rather than a could or a desire or a want. Our mood, if we're not in that right space or that energy, thinking of what to do for our self-care can be difficult. And also changing habits to look after oneself. Some of our self-care strategies that worked some years ago may not be so effective. So actually trying to create new ones or try and test out new ones might be quite hard as well. And viewing self-care as selfish or indulgent. So self-care isn't necessarily a habitual process. So me sitting in the garden at 6 o'clock in the morning out of habit is not really self-care. It's the conscious awareness, and that's where that reflection comes in as well. Is this really working? Is it something I want to do? Is it something that's benefiting me? But also, how am I feeling about doing this for me right now? Am I deeming it as selfish or indulgent? Because actually then it can feel quite counterproductive. Some of the themes within psychological professions can also be things like imposter syndrome. I qualified in 2018 from the doctorate, and I still feel like an imposter. And when I relayed that to some of our colleagues and newer colleagues within the team, they were like, seriously? Like, how many years have you been qualified and you still feel like an imposter? And actually, I don't think it does leave you. And in fact, it can be positive, because actually it means that one doesn't get complacent. One does keep striving to achieve and develop and reflect and progress. And triggers to our own core beliefs, what one is going through at the moment, might actually be triggering off some of our core beliefs and needing to feel and appear competent. So if I don't do this 12th task of the day, then my supervisor might think I'm not good enough. Some of the common thinking habits are all or nothing thinking. So the kind of dichotomous, either I'm good or not, catastrophizing the worst case scenario, disqualifying the actual positive aspect of what you're going through. Emotional reasoning, saying, you know, actually this is, I'm going to go to the shops and I'm not feeling that great, and actually look, it's not working for me, I'm going to have a bad day, almost kind of emotionally charging what your thought processes are. The shoulds and the musts can feel quite pressured. I should get on to this course. I should be successful at my assistant psychologist interview. I must do this by a certain age. Or mind reading. It's interesting because kind of thinking about what others are thinking of you is often not true. So sometimes making those assumptions need to be challenged. You know, am I trying to read my supervisor's mind? Am I trying to second guess and thinking what they're thinking? Overgeneralizing a situation and also labeling it. So some of these common thinking habits are what we do within as kind of humans, as kind of this normal human process, but actually it can be further exacerbated by the pressures that we put on ourselves as well. You're going to love me in a Mentimeter. So I've got some unhelpful strategies that are operating for you at the moment, which, as I say, we'll talk about. But if you can complete that, there's a different Menti code to the first two. And 7 types of rest that you need. So the physical, the creative, the spiritual, the emotional, the sensory. So sometimes so many sensory stimulation can fatigue us. And actually, we just need some time out from it. The social, actually, I can't go out for dinner on Friday because actually I need to just rest and be present and have some alone time. So the mental and the physical, you know, the cognitive, all of these different elements of rest. So what is it? I would urge you to kind of think, to question really, what is it that I need right now? What type of rest do I need, or what aspect of me do I need to attend to? And when to ask for help, when keeping busy isn't cutting it. When watching that 10th episode of Friends really isn't productive, or kind of you notice that is out of the ordinary. When you have any doubt, if in doubt, just ask people. You know, think about kind of what is it that they could help you with. When using strategies you've always used don't seem to work anymore. When you're struggling to manage daily life, so the things that you usually could manage, you're actually struggling with. Friends and family are concerned. Sometimes others notice things before we do. And when you're noticing unhelpful coping strategies, when I was doing my undergrad, I remember the amount of Mars bars and Coca-Cola I had. And actually, I don't normally have that. And that was for breakfast for most days to keep me focused and revising. But I was ending up with sugar slumps, really. So I couldn't really focus much more, half an hour or an hour afterwards. But actually, it wasn't helpful. So my fourth and last Mentimeter is the helpful strategies that are helping you at the moment. So I'm going to there's just a couple more slides before we open up the Mentimeters and have a discussion about these. But just some information that we think that have been kind of really helpful as a service because of the work that we've done and what people have fed back to us as well. But we've also looked at research and thinking about what is it that helps the caring profession. So first and foremost, just checking in with yourself, just noticing how you're feeling. It takes 5 seconds. Just notice, actually, am I feeling something physically? Am I feeling something emotionally? What is going on for you at the moment? Do you need to use techniques or use support? That's a question. Is there anything that can help me right now? What has helped you or are helping you? Just to remind yourself, what's helped you in the past? What is it that might need tweaking, or what do you think might be able to help you? Ground yourself in your surroundings. This is familiar possibly to many of you, but the amount of people that I've spoken to that say, you know what, I ground myself in my surroundings. They go outside into the garden and they're on their phone. Well, I'm going out, I'm looking at outside, I'm noticing my 5 senses. Actually, you're noticing what's on Instagram. So when they come back to me and they say, actually, I decided not to take my phone into the garden, and I actually heard the birds, I heard the trees, I noticed X, Y, Z in my garden, that's when you kind of you know that you're connecting a little bit more, when you're actually consciously doing it. So when we feel less in control, we can feel more stress. There are various times within our career, our working, our professional life, that we can feel less in control. It could be for at various times within the year. It could be during different changes that take place within the system. But actually, what's helpful is to anchor ourselves to what we do have control over. So we may not be able to control everything or some things, but there may be certain things in our life that we can control. And just to focus and anchor ourselves to that is important. When we worry about what we think about, the kind of the worst case scenarios, checking the facts, noticing the assumptions, such as I can't afford to take myself off the treadmill. Well, actually, what would happen if I did that? If you slowed down or even just took yourself off for a short time? Self-care, adopting this 3 times, almost prescribing it to yourself. So before work, after work, before bed. It doesn't have to take 3 hours to do. It doesn't have to take even 5 minutes to do. Sometimes it only takes 30 seconds. Offer yourself that time out, that respite, and it's okay to do that. Set boundaries, whether it's with family, friends, colleagues, supervisor. Opposite emotion. So if you're feeling anxious, you might not want to watch a film that is going to provoke it a little bit. You want something that will possibly alleviate it. And just notice your thinking patterns. Are you engaging in any of those catastrophic thinkings? What to do to stay well and what helps you to self-care or care for self. So looking at peers for support, just noticing your work-life balance, wondering just evaluating, reflecting, wondering what works for you, because what works for you might not necessarily work for other people and vice versa. But actually, what is it that can really help you in the moment? Remember, this is a journey that you're all in together. All of us are going through this journey to be part of the psychological profession. And stay present as much as possible. This anticipatory anxiety or thinking about what's happened in the past can inform us. Sometimes it's helpful, but actually sometimes it can activate that threat system so much that it kind of doesn't allow us to be in the present and focus on what is going on for us now. You all have areas of development. Actually, we all have areas of development. No matter how long somebody has been in this profession or the service, the team, we all have times and we have areas that we can develop. But also remember that you all have strengths. And don't forget that. It's easy to forget that, but have that at your core. Okay. So I'm going to see if I can share the Mentimeters, and I'd like to invite you to talk through some of the responses as well. So